Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. We're going to be starting shortly, but welcome to the webinar. Thank you for being here and on time, and we'll do some introductions shortly. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to the session today. I think we'll get started. We may have a couple of others joining when they can. So a warm welcome. My name's Rob Reeves from Acumen, part of Sanlam S4. I'm the Senior Manager for Client Success, and I work with a number of our UK universities who have strategic priorities in North America, and in particular have staff with us in the US. We're going to touch on a little bit on undergraduate strategies today, give you a bit of insight into how our wonderful team operates, looking at how the postgraduate side of things goes about as well, giving you some insight into conversion and the importance of this across North America, and also looking at a slightly different dynamic today, trying to give an example of a new and upcoming remit, particularly for elite athlete recruitment. So we've got a colleague here to touch on this today. So I've introduced myself. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Hayley. If we can come to you first for a brief introduction about yourself, your role, and a little bit about your experience with UK education so far.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Hayley Drogas, and I am the in-country recruitment officer for the University of Sheffield. And I have been with Sheffield since June, and it has been amazing. It is such a wonderful university. I'm so happy to be able to speak here today on behalf of the university. And I have been working within recruitment for UK universities for going on 6 years now. So I've had quite a bit of experience across 3 different institutions in the UK. So clearly I love working in this sector. And yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Hayley. A wonderful background you have there as well. That's really, really nice. Elise, we'll come to you next for a quick introduction.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Elise Myers. I'm an international officer with Durham University. I'm coming up on almost a year with Durham. That'll be in January, but I've loved it so far. I come from kind of a study abroad recruitment background. I was working for a provider, third-party study abroad company in the US prior to the pandemic. Then I moved over to undergraduate recruitment admissions for a Texas university. And now I've moved over into UK education here. So I'm loving it so far. And yeah, I guess I'll pass it along to David to introduce himself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise. My name is David Heller. I am based out of Washington, D.C., and I also work with Durham University. My role is very similar to Elise, where we work with postgraduate recruitment. Where my role differs a little bit is that I focus on postgraduate student athletes coming from outside of the UK, coming to Durham to participate for Team Durham while they complete their master's degree. Full disclosure, I am a graduate of Durham. I did do this program when I was a postgraduate student there. I did my MSc in marketing management while I was a student there. And now I'm so happy to be back working with them. And it's the best job I've ever had.
That sounds amazing and great. You're able to continue that experience and share your student experience with like-minded students as well. What's your sporting interest here, David? What's your expertise?
So I played volleyball at Durham, and when I returned back to the US, I coached for the last 12 years, and I rejoined Durham now in this position in May. So less than a year, but yeah, that's where my expertise was.
Thanks so much, guys. Really great to hear a bit about you and sharing that with our audience today. I think the US is a really interesting market more broadly in the concept of education. Now we can see the fourth largest provider of students to the UK now comes from the US, the second largest provider of research students as well. And as universities look to diversify their strategies away from those historically large providing markets of China, India, and Nigeria, I think there has been a lot of attention that's looking now at the US as a really good flow market where you're going to be able to help with the diversity there, but also there is a large focus on other areas, study abroad, for example, being quite large. David's mentioned his role in the athlete recruitment piece. There is the philanthropy angle as well, of which we have representatives in our portfolio in those in-country rep roles. So it's a really interesting time. I think as we're looking forward, I think what will be really key to find out from you all today, maybe if we can start with you, Hayley, is a little bit more about how you go about identifying schools or universities or fairs to attend, because it's a bit of a minefield if you're just starting new. So how would you plan for that in particular across North America? Hayley, if we come to you.
Sure, thank you. So with how vast and large the United States and North America overall is, I do think that it's important to cast a wide net, but there needs to be a strategy behind that so that you're not just, eating into your budget quickly or going to every single fair or opportunity for recruitment that is available across the United States or North America overall. The strategy that I like to use is within the data. I think that our data that we have at our institution is really key to find, what the story is, so to speak, in how to recruit effectively. So to that effect, it doesn't matter if you have an amazing CRM where you can pull data sets right from the platform, or if you're working with less than a perfect CRM, it might take a little bit more work, but it's really important to be able to get that data. So for example, something I like to do is survey the students, because you can't always effectively pull certain things from the UCAS applications or from what you have in your admissions portal or CRM. So I find surveying students to be vital as well in how did they hear about the university, how far in advance were they looking at recruiting? Or I'm sorry, speaking with a recruiter. So were they starting the process of looking at institutions from sophomore year, junior year, or was it more last minute towards senior year and they're scrambling? So I like to look at all of that, have it paint a picture for me, and then see what works best. So am I finding that more students are looking at Sheffield as a junior? Great. And then how did they hear about us? Is it mostly internet? Do we need to effectively be utilizing our budget more towards marketing and digital advertising? Or is are the connections with counselors working? Or are we getting a lot of word of mouth and recommendations from our alumni? Do we really need to tap into that network? So I think that it's really important to read the data, look at what you have available for your university to help guide you on how to effectively recruit in market. Thank you.
Thanks, Hayley. You touched on some really important things there, and particularly the use of data, where that competency is there is really, really key. Elise, anything to add to that from your experience?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I definitely agree with Hayley, just more on the postgraduate side of things. We are, I guess, a new market for postgraduate recruitment in the US with Durham. And so basically what I did, I kind of made a list of students that had applied to Durham and, made a list of, okay, what universities are they coming from? And so I was kind of like, oh, they're coming kind of from anywhere few and far between. So I can see, all right, do I need to go and visit these universities? And on student meetings, I sometimes would ask them, okay, how did you hear about Durham? Was it through your professor? Were you looking at particular programs? Anything like that that would kind of maybe spark a student's interest, and I would kind of maybe go from there. Just other recruitment tactics and styles. Handshake I use for at least graduate student fairs. So I guess historically, Handshake is a platform where universities could post like maybe internship or career opportunities, but also universities will post graduate recruitment fairs that any university might sign up for. There might be a small fee to pay, but those are a good way to maybe connect with students at different universities. Anything as well, like NAGAP is a good resource, which is the National Association of Graduate Admissions Processing. They also post a few recruitment fairs, and I was lucky enough to attend their conference in April this year. So it was good to learn at least postgraduate recruitment opportunities and whatnot, and maybe strategies that US schools were using, and maybe kind of tweaking that to go to maybe schools that are interested in the UK.
Really nice. Thanks, Elise. When you were attending events, I guess is the merit in trying to do things a little bit differently and not just going to the same events so far? So how much is in that analysis? How much can you track the student that you would meet, say, a year ago, and then decide whether to go back to those events? How much does that go into your planning?
Right. Yeah. And that's something that I'm still continuing to work on right now, since this was my first fall recruitment cycle with Durham. So I'm trying to see, okay, which events are worth going to, what universities are attending a certain events, what schools are worth going to, maybe things like that I'm trying to kind of pull and piece together, at least just from past student applicants, or just areas of opportunity maybe for Durham specific programs, our highlighted programs that we're well known for worldwide with QS World Rankings. And I'm like, okay, what universities maybe offer similar programs to what we're doing? Are there certain organizations on campus dedicated to these programs that we're offering? So that's kind of at least what I'm trying to piece together going forward. I think I'll have a better idea in the spring, maybe at least applicant data, and going on from there.
Really useful. Thank you. And David, from your perspective, I think obviously it's a slightly different remit where you're looking for that athlete profile. So how do you go about planning? Is that through networks? Is that through universities that have sporting expertise? Where do you start with the athlete recruitment?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I look at are similar academic profiles. As I say, specifically when it comes to Durham, I think that there are so many athletes in the United States. There's so many universities in the United States. It's tough to narrow down, out of 1,500 that offer athletics, how many of those can I realistically visit? And then of those, how many realistically can get into Durham? So I think from identifying the academic fits, it's also a geographical fit. It's one thing to go from living in Los Angeles to living in Durham, a very big difference. And so I think we also have to be realistic when we're looking at athletes who would have a successful student experience while living in Durham, depending on where they spent their undergrad here in the United States. But a lot of my work comes through my connections. Like I said, I've worked in the athletics world of college athletics here in the United States for about 12 years. And so through that, I've kind of developed a great network of friends that can kind of help me get into different universities over here and be able to speak live with a lot of student athletes. And that's been really, really helpful to kind of then, again, talk about my experience, what it's like to live overseas, play overseas, study over there, and the visa process, all of those things. So it's been really, really helpful to have those friends that kind of initiate those connections, and then hoping I can continue to build those at those universities.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. So obviously, it's slightly different to the typical recruitment path there. So really, really handy to know, and good advice for those looking to explore this area in the future. Second question really was to look at whether you're seeing, whilst you're out on the road, different change in demand for subjects, perhaps even post-pandemic, or maybe even subject area changes that you've seen. Perhaps Elise, we'll come to you first for that one.
Right, yeah, I can begin with this. And I believe every one of us can agree that anything in the STEM field has been a big focus for students, maybe pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, maybe even students looking for online opportunities, anything like that. I know from some of the graduate fairs that I've attended recently, many students have been interested in like the one-year Master of Research, which is very interesting to them to work, directly in labs and research centers. And so I've been talking to plenty of students that are looking into like physics or chemistry, mathematics research. So I believe that's going to be a big trend going forward in the postgraduate undergraduate space as well. And even Durham University itself, we're trying to implement more programs within the STEM field going forward, to have that more available to our students. So that's what I can speak of, at least for trends. Obviously, I see a majority of our applications going to maybe our more historic, highly ranked programs too, but at least for differentiating trends going forward, I think STEM is going to be really huge for universities.
Really good insights there, Elise. And interesting you mentioned about the research piece and that demand increasing. That's perhaps an area that's quite untapped for a lot of UK universities. It's a little bit more complex than the undergraduate and the postgraduate taught recruitment, but really interesting to see those trends. Hayley, what's your take on this one?
Well, I definitely agree with Elise that there has been, a continued or slightly increased interest within the STEM areas of study. I definitely think that post-pandemic, that there's an even larger interest within medicine. So nursing, midwifery, of course, medicine. So that area of study, I think students are more passionate about getting involved now, that they've seen, how much of an effect that had on that industry or sector with COVID. So I definitely see an increase in applications and conversation around those topics of study. And then I also have seen such an increase within computer science. So computer science, anything involving IT, anything digital, really. I've seen a large uptick and increase within those courses and areas of study as well. I do think that might have something to do with COVID, but also just in general with technology, what's happening with AI, anything overall. And I think that we're also seeing a difference in how people are working. So a lot of employers during COVID realized we can function properly without everyone coming into a large office every day. We can utilize those funds elsewhere. We don't have to pay for the amount of office space that we have been previously. And so a lot of jobs are becoming more digital. And I think that might also be driving the interest and increase in students wanting to study in those particular courses.
Really nice insights. Yeah, good knowledge transfer there. I think there's so many nice things that the pandemic has actually taught us, and I think even with the online delivery, that's a space that's expanding certainly. David, I think it's probably more of a complex question from the athlete side, because I can only presume the subject interest is just so vast. Is that my understanding correct there, or are there any perhaps sporting interests that you're appealing? Are you seeing more athletics students interested, not necessarily post-pandemic, just more broadly? What kind of trends can you see here?
Yeah. I would say it's definitely a very much a wide net that our student athletes are studying while they're at Durham. I think historically there are quite a few of us that have, similar to my track, that come back and want to be involved in athletics here in the United States. Currently, I would say we've had, I think, 1,200 graduates through our Sports Scholar program at Durham. And I can name about 50 people that are in coaching or involved some way in college athletics here in the United States that I know and are in my network. So I'd say that it does kind of depend on also what region they come from. A lot of our student athletes that are coming from California are involved in tech and computer sciences. A lot of those in the Midwest are going into engineering, and those that are in New York tend to be a lot more financially based or business related. So it does kind of work out regionally where you're from, does tend to be what they end up studying, but obviously they are kind of all over the board. I think our largest program that we have this year is business analytics, is where most of our student athletes are competing right now, or I'm sorry, not competing, studying right now.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, thanks for that, David. I think as a follow-on question, really, to all of you, but we'll start with you, David. When you've obviously gone out on the road, you've been promoting your respective universities. Ideally, that leads to an application, and then there's a little bit of I guess, competition there to recruit those students and convert them into joining your program. And they may have a range of different questions in that. But do you have any kind of techniques that have worked really well from you? I guess David being a graduate helps, but what kind of techniques would you say work really well in a conversion mindset?
Something that we're not used to, I would say, in the United States is honesty goes a really long way. I think making sure that they fully understand everything that is going to go through the application, every charge, the visa application, the healthcare surcharge, making sure all of that information is very available to them, because it is something that is not known. For us to be considered international is a far off concept for most Americans. So I think that as honest as we can be in those conversations is really, really important. I think the other thing that we do really well, Elise and I do monthly webinars for all of our applicants and offer holders. And again, getting to talk to an alumni of the university, getting to talk to someone who knows the university really well, like Elise does, it's been really, really helpful for us to both be on those calls and provide as much real-time information to the students, what challenges they might face, what to bring with them when they move over. We really kind of cover everything. I think having someone in the same time zone as you that's dedicating time to that is really helpful. Students that are coming from California, they miss our office completely. By the time they wake up, the office in the UK is already closed. So it is quite difficult for them to kind of get live answers from a person. So it's great having Elise and I accessible in different time zones for them. And like, so we make ourselves really available for them and in those webinars.
Really, really useful insight there, David. I think you mentioned about being on the same time zone and having that, easy contact. How long would a student be prepared to wait to get a response? I mean, is there now with everybody glued to their phones and what that's led to post-pandemic, is there an expectation of a quick level of service, a quick response? And obviously that's a large part of your workload, I can only imagine.
Yeah, I would say with athletes especially, they are used to, if they have emailed me, they expect a response within an hour, because that is what they will get in the United States. When they're recruited, and a coach's full-time responsibility is to recruit and make sure that they are continuing to bring students in. If they have to wait more than an hour, they're going to take another offer. They're going to go to another university where they already have that answer and they're not waiting on that information. So I am pretty much glued to my email account 24/7. But again, I love the work and it's what I was used to while I was coaching here. So I would say Americans do definitely expect a faster response. Athletics even faster. Yeah, that would, I would say, be my specific experience working with athletes that are coming over.
Yeah, that hour turnaround is fascinating. At the previous university I worked at, there was a 48-hour expectation to respond to anything in the general inbox. Obviously, individuals had their own remit, and that was quite challenging enough. So 1 hour, wow, that's keeping you busy, certainly. Yeah. At least, is it the same for you?
Yes, I just want to, just reiterate what David said. The webinars are so important for just any postgraduate students or just any student, and communicating with them. It's really important when they're going to another country and it might be a little bit different and maybe even challenging or scary for them at first, to make them feel comfortable. But I mean, we worked so hard over this past summer. We started with just kind of like a general Durham presentation. I just had to keep adding slides for, okay, it's summertime, they need to know about visas, they need to know about cast numbers, they need to know about enrollment processes, they need to know like what it's going to be like arriving on campus, there's a pickup service, anything like that. So we just kind of keep tweaking it and adding to it as these questions kept coming in. And I think even coming into this next recruitment cycle, we'll be very well prepared for just different questions and different needs for students coming in. And then David put together this beautiful pre-arrival packet. So just again, reiterating that communication is really, really needed, at least for US students that are coming to UK. Another thing that I've found helpful for enrollment is if you have the opportunity to meet in person with a student, please do it at any point in time. I know, at least for my Texas applicants, I'm meeting with one next week in Waco. It's just really easy for me to drive up there really quick for the day. That makes all the difference if they can actually meet someone in person with the university. And even in the springtime last year, I mean, if I was traveling to New York or California, I would, make a little Calendly invite event and be like, oh, okay, here's a 30-minute session. I'm going to be at this coffee shop for 2 to 3 hours. Come and sign up for a session. And obviously, if I was in New York City and if someone was in Ithaca, for example, that'd be a little bit difficult for them to get to. But I think it was nice at least knowing that, oh, okay, someone was willing to meet with them. And if they couldn't meet in person, just giving them the space to maybe book a virtual appointment in that way. So that's another good, I guess, conversion enrollment tactic. And then just the communication, even if it's just a student texts you really quick and you respond, if you just email them like, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything at this time? That goes a long way too.
Yeah, really, really interesting point, particularly on pre-arrival and the expectations. I can only presume not many of your students will have visited campus before as well. So having that expectation and particularly working with parents as well would be really key here. Really useful. Thank you. And Hayley, anything else to add from your perspective on a conversion technique that has worked really well for you in the past?
Yes, thanks, Rob. I 100% agree with everything that David and Elise said. I do think that communication is key, being available, being willing to help the applicants through the process. The one thing that I would really add is the personal touch. So ensuring that your communications are more personalized. It's one thing at the beginning when they are prospects or just applied, it's very easy to send, widecast mail merge to all of the students, just inputting their name, maybe inputting their course. But once those applicants, have made their decisions, they're getting closer to deciding, is this my first choice? Is this my second choice? Do I actually want to go with my insurance choice on the UCAS? Or, do I want to accept an offer in another country back in the US? That is when you really need to ensure that you are being so personable in your messages to the students. So ensuring that they understand they're not just one of many, you know who they are, you're there to help them. Even just when I jump on calls, remembering little key things that we spoke about last time. Hey, how's the planning going? I know that you can afford to and are planning on going to visit campuses in the UK in spring. Do you need any help? Do you have any questions or need advice around flights? Just those little things, working them into conversations, and that the students really pick up on that. It really makes them realize, like, wow, this person remembers me. I'm speaking with a real human being. It's not, a stranger on the other side of an admissions at email box. So I find that to be really important to build that relationship. And another thing is to look at it this way: we are the first step in the forefront of the image that they are perceiving of these institutions that we work for. So if we are doing our best and being communicative, as Elise and David said, and being able to personalize our messages and just have one-to-one conversations with these students, that's making them realize, like, wow, this university they're kind, they're responsive, And that makes all the difference when it comes down to students making that ultimate decision of where they're going to study for their degree, no matter what level it's at.
Personal piece is really key. Such a really important piece. We don't want students to think it's, you know, a male merge approach. The final question, really, this has been such a really, really useful debate, really interesting debate, certainly from my perspective. And we have got a number of questions, which is really good to see already. Question, really, maybe we'll start with you, Hayley, and you've touched on some of these things already, but how, I guess, what is the most question, what's the first and perhaps most important question that you get asked from a prospective student to the UK? What is their main driver, worry, question that you get asked, Hayley?
There are quite a few, not too many, but a few main ones that I see across the board. But the one thing that I see time and time again is, will I be one of many US students, or am I going to get a true international experience? And I think that that's really important to share with them, you know, how diverse our institutions are, that they're not only going to meet so many UK domestic students that grow up in the UK, but also students from all over the world, and that our institutions in the UK are truly global, and they're going to be able to meet people from all over the world.
Perfect. Really useful, Hayley. David, how about you?
I would say from an athlete perspective, we get a very different set of questions from, I would say, some of the other undergrad or postgraduate students. Number one for us is always scholarship. What scholarship opportunities are available? Most athletes in the United States that are coming over are going to be coming from a place where most of their schooling, if not all of it, was covered by an athletic scholarship. So that is, I would say, a barrier that we face is funding, is going to be the number one question if you are looking into athletics, making sure that you've investigated that or have an answer to that question. And number two, I think, is the big question will be, how do I balance life between athletics and academics? Meaning, what is the quality of life for your student athletes? What is it like to participate in a sport there? And kind of having someone be able to explain what that process is like, because it is quite different from what their experience would be here in the United States.
Thank you so much. Elise, anything else to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely agree with David and Hayley. Finances and, you know, student life and support are very important. I guess the one question I get asked a lot is just what kind of support is available on campus. I mean, most students are coming from, at least they've been in a university for the past 4 years. They've had a ton of, you know, career advice, you know, different organizations they've been involved with, anything like that. They're leaving their friends and maybe even their family if they didn't go out of state for their undergraduate degree. So it can be a very different experience. So I think students want to know, okay, obviously David and I are in the United States and we're communicating with them as frequently as possible, but what is it going to be like on campus? And so we make sure, at least in our webinars at first, to let them know we have a career and enterprise center that can do anything from like interview prep, CV writing, anything like that. If they have maybe job or internship interests, are their professors going to be available to them? If they want to meet with a professor, I'm happy to do an introduction for them in the beginning. Any organizations, any communities that they can be involved with, so they know that they're feeling safe when they're in another country, and just little resources like that. Just they want to know that they're supported on campus and off of campus, just to make that transition very easy for them. So I'd say that's a good question I get.
Thank you guys so much for your insights and sharing your experience with our audience today, who are very engaging. We've got 10 questions waiting for us, which is really good. Thank you guys, in particular Sam, for putting so many really important points down for us to cover. Would anybody like to address the question on Common App? So your experience with it, does it help support counsellors? And I guess giving UK that more bit of visibility. Elise, as you're in front of me on my screen, do you use Common App at Durham?
We are not on Common App, so I unfortunately do not have experience with this. I do know there's about at least 20 UK institutions or so on the Common App, and maybe even a little bit more international schools. I don't know if Haley, you have a little bit more experience with Common App. Is Sheffield on the Common App?
Sheffield is not on the Common App. However, my last institution, University of Roehampton, was just signing the contract for Common App right before I made the move over to Sheffield. And my forever friend, former colleague, Amanda, who is the in-country regional manager for Roehampton, said that it was going well last time I checked. But the one thing that I will say that's interesting when we were considering it at Roehampton is that, you know, it may not be right for every UK institution. It depends on, you know, what courses you offer, what the admissions process is overall, where you're located in country. Because with a process, with a platform rather like Common App, you know, you're going to get those students who have never heard of you before and might just submit that as another option. Whereas you know, your university in the UK might be looking for those students who already have done their research and know about us, which I think is a huge benefit to UCAS, that there's only 5 choices and students typically do their research before adding any schools to the UCAS application.
Thank you both. That's great. I hope that's helpful, Sam. Please do get in touch. We do work with other universities for Common App, so we can certainly give you a bit more advice on that, but really useful, Haley, for sharing that on Roehampton. Sam also asks about breaking down the occupation industry demand by state and linking that to programs. Is that something that you've been able to do quite easily at your respective institutions?
I would say that's not something that is necessarily done a whole lot, because again, I would say most athletes do not go to a university in their state if they're going to play a sport. They tend to go outside. I would say that that's not something that we do technically or typically. It's more so about job placement when they come back to the United States, or when they are done with their undergraduate degree. It may be a little bit easier to find. Obviously, tech goes to California, Silicon Valley, things like that, regardless of where they came from for their undergrad or postgrad. So I'd say it's more about finding out what they want to do after, as opposed to where they're from originally, in my experience with athletics.
Haley, at least anything to add?
I think as far as, you know, splitting up the territories or finding out where to go, I think just, you know, looking at the historic data and maybe what's going forward there. I mean, we have like all of North America for our territory, so it's hard to, you know, be everywhere all at once, but you can always reach out to different students, advisors, counselors, and, you know, be available virtually, or if they express interest, might be able to plan a trip around that. So it can just be kind of anything like that. It's really up to you and what's important for your institution, where you need to go or where you need to travel.
Just had an interesting kind of follow-up question that I think I'll bring in here, is that, are there any states that you've seen various trends recently towards the UK? Are there any kind of emerging states potentially for new universities looking to establish themselves in the US, or for those already established universities? Are there any states that you see that are very pro-UK just currently?
In Texas, since that's where I'm based and where I'm trying to do most of the work here. So we'll see how that trend moves going forward into the spring and applications. But I think, you know, just historically larger populated states, California is a huge territory. Anywhere in the Northeast tends to be huge as well. So I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to at least go into maybe some new markets and try and pick and choose different territories that might be appealing for some students. I don't want to leave anyone out. But again, I'm only one person, and me and David are only the 2 people working in the state. So, I mean, whatever interest there is, at least for different programs that students might be interested in, maybe, you know, alumni that are within different states or working maybe at some institutions there, kind of that's a place to start.
Anything to add, Haley?
No, I once again agree with what Elise said. I think that it's important to, you know, look at the data and see, you know, where the interest is. Again, Texas is very popular for UK recruitment. A lot of students have interest, especially in areas, of course, like engineering, aviation, STEM, based off of those career fields that are available in Texas. But beyond that, there's definitely hot pockets. So the Northeast corridor, so, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut. But we're starting to see a larger interest in other areas like Pacific Northwest. California is always going to be popular. Florida is always going to be popular. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's for specific courses or programs, but overall, as Elise said, sometimes it's just based off of the most populated states and those students having the mindset to go abroad.
Perfect. Thank you all. I think that this question does come up quite often. Which social media channels work best when engaging with students? Hayley, do you have an opinion here?
I find it interesting. I've been in higher ed recruitment for a decade now, and Facebook, of course, used to be so popular, not so much anymore with today's applicants, at least on the undergraduate level. David, it might be a little bit different for sport or at least for postgraduate, but in terms of the age group right now, I'd say that Instagram and TikTok are a lot larger, which has been really interesting to have to move into that and making less posts and more videos for those platforms, as these students today are engaging and looking more at video content than just posts.
David, how about you from a sports perspective?
Yeah, Hayley nailed it right on the head. If you're not on Instagram or TikTok, self-admittedly, I am not on TikTok. But now after Hayley's message, I might have to join. But I would say that student athletes become so accustomed to earning name, image, likeness money from their social media posts in the United States that it is just a part of their life to literally wake up, post something, they get paid for doing it, and it's such a part of their life that I would say that if you're not active on all of those platforms, you're going to miss out on students, because that is where they get their information. I have students who, instead of Googling something, they now TikTok it. Like, it's easier for them to go search for something on TikTok than it would to type in on YouTube or Google. So it is one of those things that as the landscape changes, you want to make sure you're ahead of the curve and not try to catch up 10 years later. And now trying to get active on Facebook, you're not going to see a large increase in student activity there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I think we've touched a lot on the US recruitment piece, but somebody asked a very valid question here on Canada. Does that fall within your remits currently? And what kind of trends, what kind of demand do you see coming out of Canada for UK education currently? David, maybe from the sports side?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to spend a few weeks up in Canada earlier this semester, and got to work with universities, but also worked with SIUK and an event with them. And it was really great. I would say that law and medicine were the two trends that I saw really highly coming out of the Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa areas, because there are so few schools that will have top programs with there. I would say there were a lot of students that I probably talked to, oh my gosh, probably 200 students at that event, and I would say over half of them were interested in law. We don't have a medicine program at Durham, so it probably would have been even longer if we offered that. But I would say that those are two areas that were really, really strong in Canada. And I go back for another event in March or April, I can't remember when it is. But universities there, I would say certain of them are very keen to work with British universities, and some of them were definitely not so keen to work with us, depending on whether they thought there would be value added in working with another British university or sending graduate students on. I know there was a question that mentioned, like, does it seem like we're poaching graduate students from the undergrad institutions? And I would say that it all, I think, goes in how you approach the situation. If you're going in, sometimes I will target a specific group of students who maybe we offer a program that their undergraduate institution doesn't. Another easy way for us to not poach students from them, because if you don't offer a master's in business administration and we do, I'm not really stealing a student from you if that's what your student wants to study. And I would say that going through certain offices has also really helped, making sure that if I'm targeting archaeology students because we have a top archaeology program, that they know that we have a master's in that if their undergraduate doesn't. So I think it does take a lot of work on our side to make sure that we're not stepping on toes or poaching students away from their current institution. Because we never want to burn a bridge of somewhere where a student could come to us or where we have a university actively marketing for us. So it takes a lot of research, I will say, but it is great when you get to, connect with that one or two students at a university who want to study postgraduate in a different location when they did their undergraduate.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. You touched on some really interesting things there, particularly in Canada, and you've referenced a couple of agents there. More broadly, how do you navigate working with agents in the US? It's obviously quite a new kind of concept here, and there are a few players in the game, but maybe at least, do you have experience yourself in the US kind of agent landscape? Well, I think you might be breaking up a little bit there, Elise, or I'm not sure. And that's okay. We'll go to Haley and we'll come back to you.
You guys hear me okay?
We can, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so regarding agents, I find that it is a tough touch point in regards to recruitment and the US, as it's not as common, and in terms of legality, it can be hard to work with agents in any manner in terms of recruitment across the US or North America as a whole, especially if we are talking about students that need funding opportunities. That typically takes away the option to utilize FAFSA US federal loans if they're going to be working with a student, with an agent. And so for the students that are going to need that funding, how do you navigate that? And then overall too, it can just be tough in terms of how do we work with these companies, with these agents in market, in terms of branding, promotion, because it's such an industry in other markets, like different parts of Asia, India, even countries in Africa. And so in the US, I think that it's difficult to work in that manner, but I am seeing an increase. But interestingly enough, I'm seeing some companies pull back due to the lack of being able to work with students who need to utilize federal funding.
Perfect. Really, really useful. It's obviously an expanding area at the moment. Elise, have we got you back?
Okay. I lost kind of audio sometimes. I don't believe work with agencies just because of the cover that student for federal loans. I just kind of do my own recruitment. I do my own travel, my own events to attend, make my own, and then so I'm really thinking like agents. I know at least for athletics, I know sometimes athletes will apply through these for everything. I really don't have a lot of evidence.
Thanks, Liz. I think we got most of that. I think there is a little bit of an internet lag there, but no worries. Really, really helpful. Thank you so much. Where do we go now? Oh, a question on NACAC. Are there any postgraduate fairs similar to NACAC that any of you would recommend if you're looking at focusing on postgraduate recruitment? At least you want to tackle
I
that
would
one?
say
Okay, I can try.
Either or.
Sorry, Elise, I know we have issues sometimes with the sound. I would say that we have kind of strayed away from a lot of postgraduate fairs, to be honest. There are I think we found some other avenues that are a little bit more successful for what Durham needs and what Durham students are who's going to be a successful candidate for Durham. There are a few virtual fairs that we definitely attend, and a lot of those can be kind of found in different country links. Each country has their own ones. I've done virtual events in Canada, United States, and Colombia, as well as Brazil. And really in those, I've found that it's good for getting our name out there. Whereas in-person graduate fairs in the United States, I feel like are not always well attended, and they can be a little bit more difficult to find success at. But I would say that for most postgraduate work, a lot of postgraduate fairs are also going to have employers there. So you're going to be competing not only with graduate schools, but also with people who are going to pay them instead of going to school. So there are some challenges that you'll find at graduate fairs that obviously you don't with an undergraduate fair.
Yeah, really, really good suggestions there as well. I think Elise and Hayley, anything just to add on that one?
I think that there's it's not possible recruitment actually. I did all that.
Sorry, Elise, I think we're losing you. Apologies. We'll try and come back if we can. But yeah, thank you. Hayley, anything just to add on that one?
Sure. I think it's really important. I agree with what David said. So sorry, Elise, I could not hear you. But you know, it is tough to find really successful postgraduate fairs across the United States these days. One thing that I will say is, and I know that Elise and David mentioned before, utilizing the platform Handshake, going into specific universities in the US to attend their postgraduate fairs can be a good path. But if you're going to do that, you know, I used to work heavily within postgraduate recruitment years ago, and I would always make an extra effort to see if while I was on campus, if I had any relative postgraduate courses to their undergraduate courses, and reaching out to those academic departments to see if they had any courses that I could come and give a pitch to at the end of their class. So I think that, you know, it's just that extra bit, and try to do that before the fair, and then say, if you want more information, come find me at the fair. I do think that that is a good option or opportunity. And just another one would be, you know, if you are going to recruit in person, try getting in touch with with your study abroad partners, whether you just have exchange agreements or fee paying agreements as well. Reach out to those universities. If you already have a solid relationship and partnership with them, you know, those students already have you in their mind. They already know your reputation. So try reaching out, being like, hey, I'd like to also come and, you know, speak with this certain department with those students. Or do you have a postgraduate fair this coming you know, recruitment season? I'd love to be able to attend. So I think that finding those extra special ways to be able to maximize the recruitment efforts is really key for postgrad.
Thanks so much, Hayley. We've got a couple of questions left. I think we've tried to answer as many of these as we can today. We will leave an email address contact for follow-up as well, in case we're not able to answer your question, but I think we should be okay for time now. In terms of business programs from across North America, are there any particular programs that stand out? I think, David, you've touched on business analytics, I think, today. Are there any other programs that, other than perhaps MBA, the traditional programs that you're seeing inquiries from?
Yeah, I would say another attractive route for American students to go is international relations, because they're coming to a new country. So international relations within business is one that I've seen is quite popular right now. And apart from the MBA, I would say finance is another one, because it's not the old joke, numbers are the same in every language. 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. So I think that they're not having to learn something completely new when they enter the realm of finance, accounting. They're obviously learning different practices and things that take place in another country, but numbers are always going to be the same. So I think that having that international experience is something that they'll enjoy having, while still being able to be involved with something that's familiar to them.
Perfect. And Hayley, anything to add?
Not necessarily there. I think that David gave a great answer. Just being conscious of time, that way we can try to get as many questions answered as possible. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, really good point. I will come back to you on the next one, Hayley, which is the difference between the application systems for UK and US, obviously different timelines, and when conditional offers are issued. How do you kind of navigate that to support conversion?
Yeah, so that really can be tough, to be able to speak with students, especially when they're concerned about that, and rightfully so, if they, are at risk of, having their offer rescinded if they don't reply by a certain date in the US, but then God forbid they don't meet their conditions come the summertime, once they're able to turn unconditional for the UK. One thing that I think is key is working with those students well in advance, having those conversations with them, maybe even chatting with their counselors, like, what are their predicted grades looking like? Do you think, what does the student think, are they going to meet those AP requirements? And maybe even looking at alternative options or opportunities. So just hypothetically, if you have a student who really is concerned about a certain AP that they need, or any type of qualification that they need to meet their conditions of their offer in the UK, maybe looking if there's an opportunity for a fallback that they can do to still come to the university. So would they be willing to do a foundation year if we really are their first choice, and God forbid they don't meet that one requirement for their conditions of their offer, and does that course have a foundation year? So just looking at opportunities to cushion the fall, so to speak, and give them alternative options. But one thing that I will say is just communication and trying to manage their expectations and work with them through the process to make them feel comfortable and confident within their decision if they are going to, let the offer in the US be rescinded, or just decline it and go through the process of waiting to see if they're going to meet the conditions in the UK. Just that communication and being there for the student. Sometimes, just like a mental thought that, they get worried. And just being there for them, I find, is really important.
Thanks so much, Hayley. I think we've probably got time for one very quick one. The session is being recorded, so we will make sure that the link is shared on social media. Please get in touch if you can't find the link within a few days, but we will aim to do that one. Finally, a little bit on how you work with private counsellors, and if you do so, and how you would kind of interact with them. David, do you want to start on that one? Just, I guess I'll pick on you, David, just to conclude on that one.
Yeah. So mine is done through academic advisors in the United States in their respective university, is who I typically go through. It's not the same as if there were like a private counselor for an undergraduate admissions for me. Mine, again, I identify the university and then the best person to speak with at that university who's going to know the academic and professional path of all of their students. So I identify that person and I'll work really closely with them.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining. A huge thanks to Elise, David, and Hayley for your time. I know it's quite early where you guys are, so we really appreciate that, and the time difference that we've obviously spoken about the challenges with today. If you'd like to reach out, I'll ask a couple of my colleagues to put their details in the chat box, and those who are comfortable sharing details, please do. But just a huge thanks, and we look forward to interacting with you all in the future. Thanks so much.